What's up everybody, welcome back to another reaction video. Today we're checking out why there's so many belts in boxing and why it's ruining the sport. This is by TJ Loves Fights. First time reacting to this guy, first time reacting to any of these types of videos. As you guys know, or as you should know, I love boxing. I want to get more boxing reaction videos up on this channel. Just really didn't know how, so hey, I feel like this is going to be a good way to incorporate that into the channel. Hope you guys enjoy. I definitely agree though with the belts. There's way too many. I don't mind the WBC, WBA, WBO, IBF in the ring, but it's all those sub belts in those organizations after that. Like WBC has so many different belts, like intercontinental belts and specific continent belts. There's no need for that. But hey, we're gonna react to this video. Hope you guys enjoy.
There are way too many belts in boxing, and it's ruining the sport. The WBA, WBC, WBO, and IBF are the four main belt organizations.
See, I don't mind that. I don't mind that.
Alphabet Soup, Alphabet Army, or Alphabet Bodies by the fans due to their names. These organizations rank boxers and award belts. There's also the Ring magazine, which is a publication.
But nobody really takes that one serious.
But they do famously award belts to the best fighter they think is in that weight class. So there's also the lineal champion, who is the guy who beat the guy who beat the guy who beat the guy all the way down to the first champion when there was only one belt. But we won't get into the Ring magazine belt and the lineal championship because this video is mostly talking about the Alphabet Army or the boxing organizations that give out belts today. So how did we go from one championship, which was the lineal championship, to four different championship belts?
Money.
Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about the history of how we got to this point where there's four organizations awarding belts, and also the implications of four different belt organizations and how they're ruining the sport. So, quick history for why there's four belt organizations instead of one. The first and original major belt organization in boxing was the NBA, standing for National Boxing Association, and later turned into the WBA, standing for World Boxing Association. I guess at some point they wanted to go worldwide. So since the 1920s all the way up to the 1980s, they were the only major boxing organization that gave out belts for not only the US, but eventually the whole world. Though by the 1980s, there were several reports of corruption. Apparently, the WBA president was
corruption all across the sports.
Certain fighters to be higher in the rankings. He was taking briberies from promotions to have their fighters ranked higher. And apparently, in an interview with Bob Arum, he said he had to pay off the WBA to get the rankings of his fighters. So by 1983, the WBC, World Boxing Council, was made to combat corruption and is usually regarded as the most prestigious out of all the belts. But as you may find through this history lesson, the WBC also fell victim to a lot of the corruption found in the WBA. And though this belt is regarded as probably the most prestigious belt, they're definitely not the cleanest. So going back to the WBA, a guy named Robert Lee, no relation, tried to become the president of the WBA, and when he couldn't, he just created his own organization called the IBF, or the International Boxing Federation. And obviously the IBF tried to sell itself as a boxing organization that has none of the corruption that the WBA had. But surprise, surprise, the IBF also had a lot of corruption, and Robert Lee was actually arrested on tax evasion and money laundering in 2000. Then finally, we have the WBO, World Boxing Organization, that again stemmed from a lot of people just having a lot of gripes with the WBA, and at this point, what the hell? Let's just add another boxing organization, add more corruption, and make more money. So how does these four organizations work in practice? Well, for newer fans, this may seem ridiculous because it is. Okay, so I'm also a big NBA fan, and I'm not talking the boxing organization, but let me give you a scenario to show really how ridiculous this four belt system is. So let's take the NBA 2022 playoffs. At the end of the semis, we had four teams left: the Dallas Mavericks, the Golden State Warriors, the Miami Heat, and the Boston Celtics.
They all get a belt.
And let's just say the tournament just stopped right there. Each of those teams got a trophy, and they never had to play each other to see who was the best.
Yeah.
That's kind of how boxing works right now. Granted, most divisions don't have four separate champions, but there's a lot of situations where the top 2 or 3 guys in a weight class
right there
don't really have to fight.
The welterweight, Daryl Spencer, Terence Crawford, so annoying.
So obviously the biggest problem with 4 separate belt organizations is that you'll get several situations where nobody is really forced to fight anybody. Without a single governing body / organization, the best don't have to fight the best. And even within the organizations, these fighters don't even have to fight each other within the rankings. Each belt organization has quote-unquote mandatories, but these are used at the organization's convenience. So take the lightweight division, where Devin Haney is the super WBA champion, but Gervonta Davis is the regular.
That's the stuff I don't like. The super in the world. That's what I was talking about earlier.
Should have
just make one
to unify the division, but nothing has happened. So besides the best not fighting the best anymore, another result of these boxing organizations are the belts losing their meaning. So you remember when I said Devin Haney is the super WBA champion, while Gervonta Davis is the regular WBA champion?
There should just be one WBA champion, not super, not world, not intercontinental.
They've been created by the boxing organization, in this case the WBA, for just simply more belts. The WBC has done the same thing, creating a franchise champion for their belt, and more belts simply just means less meaning to each belt. I mean, does a regular champion or does a non-franchise champion really mean anything? I mean, the reason why an NBA ring is so important, or the Super Bowl is so important, is that every single year there's only one that can be achieved. So every single team has to fight for that one trophy, making it super rare and super valuable, and obviously super meaningful. So you're probably wondering, why do these belt organizations continue to create bogus titles and bogus belts if the titles and belts are just going to lose meaning if they keep continuing to create more? So the simple answer is sanctioning fees. So whenever a title fight is created, a promoter must pay one of the belt organizations to basically sanction their fight. So obviously if it is a unification fight, then the promoter must pay a certain percentage to each of the 4 boxing organizations. I hope you're understanding how ridiculous this system is. This just incentivizes belt organizations to create more belts and more titles, again leaving less meaning for the belts. Just to name a few, there's interim championships, gold championships, silver championships, regular championships, super championships, and now franchise championships.
It's getting embarrassing.
I don't know how many other words they're gonna make up, but as long as they keep getting their sanctioning fees, they're gonna keep making stuff up. So the simple solution would be to have one single belt and one single governing body. Obviously,
I wish boxing was like the UFC,
for one single belt,
but
the best would have
I'll
to
get more into that at the end
if they wanted to be the champion. This would reinstate a lot of meaning to the belt, because obviously there's only one belt, and that would be the undisputed, globally recognized champion. So what is the problem? A one governing body and one belt per weight class would solve everything in boxing. Well, unity would be practically impossible. Uniting the organizations would mean there'd have to be one board or one council of leadership, meaning the leaders of previously separate organizations would lose positions of power. And obviously, if you don't have a position of power, you won't have the opportunity to get money from sanctioning fees and maybe money from corrupt practices like briberies. So if you ever watched the end of The Godfather Part 1, this is a pretty similar scenario. If we were to try to unify all of these organizations, who would be the leader? Who takes over? All of these organizations have their own territory, they have their own way of making money, and it would be really hard to unify them because they would have to agree upon how each of them would split evenly. You have to remember from before that these organizations were primarily created because they didn't like practices that another organization was doing. So they're not necessarily on a good working relationship with each other. So let's say in a perfect world, these organizations are able to unify correctly. The fighters and promoters might have a problem with this. I mean, the promoters are going to lose out, obviously, on a lot of money.
Like Ryan Garcia randomly had a belt, even though he didn't beat the actual champion.
May have a problem with this because of the same reason promoters do, but also there's an added factor of not having that opportunity to hold on to one of the belts and not having to fight the other best within that weight class. So as you can see, there's a very simple solution. Have one governing body and have one belt, but to implement this solution would be practically impossible. Between the many organizations wanting to keep their positions of power, the promoters wanting more championship fighters, and fighters no longer having the opportunity to hold on to one belt and not having to fight the best, I realistically can't see the creation of one governing body and one belt just because there's so many people to have to please. So what do you guys think? Will there ever be one belt, one governing body to rule them all? Or will we continue to have this ridiculous system for champions? Again, share your thoughts in the comments and please subscribe because I'm going to continue to...
Okay, so yes, this was a problem I always had since I got into the sport of boxing, was there's too many belts. Now, I mentioned earlier in the introduction of the video that I don't mind the 4 belts, the IBF, WBC, WBA, WBO. I don't mind that. it's the stuff that I hate is the, the super, the world, the franchise, the intercontinentals, the Asian, the North American, the South American belts. I don't like all that stuff. If you're gonna make it 4, just make it 4. That's it. I feel like the first thing we could do to solve this problem is get rid of those sub belts. Okay, so the super, what I just mentioned. Okay, I think that's the first solution we could do to actually help in this. Because you get rid of that, it'll start to make people fight the best of the best. Okay, like you would have had, we mentioned earlier in the video with Devin Haney, Gervonta Davis, with one being the super, one being the world. If you get rid of that crap and just make it the WBA, we'd maybe be able to see Gervonta Davis versus Devin Haney. Okay, we wouldn't have to be seeing, 2 rematches with George Kambosos or Gervonta Tank Davis fighting Gamboa or Isaac Cruz. No disrespect to those guys, but that's how it is. Thankfully, this year's very good for boxing. We're seeing Tank versus Garcia, Plant versus Benavidez, Taylor versus Teofimo, hopefully Fury versus Usyk. I think I said Plant Benavidez, but Oloma versus Haney. We're seeing these fights come up. But I think the first solution that we could try is get rid of those garbage subcategory of belts and just make it the 4. Then we could go from there. I don't know. He mentioned that it's basically impossible to make a one unifying thing, basically like the UFC. I'd love it to be like that. It just seems so impossible. It's like politics. It's really what it comes down to: politics and money. People don't want to give up their position of power. Okay, let's say if we all formed under WBC. Okay. IBF's not going to want to give that up. WBA is not going to want to give that up. WBO is not going to want to give that up. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not going to want to give it up. Positions of power and money. They're just going to surrender to one organization. Not going to happen. It sucks, though. It sucks. I think it comes down mainly to the fighters, though. The fighters got to be able to want to fight each other. Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, they don't want to fight each other. Why? Because they want to protect their 0. They don't want to lose. That's the main problem. The second main problem is all these belts in these organizations. But the main problem is these fighters not wanting to fight each other. I mean, I get it. They don't want to lose their 0, but still, this was not really a problem 30, 40 years ago. You know what I mean? That's why they're not as respected as today as they were back then. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think down below. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'm out. Peace.